Well, the first photograph I remember taking was of my mum and dad in Whitby on holiday, about 1957, 1958. Stood out against a wall overlooking Whitby. That same visit, I found the photographs of Frank Meadows Sutcliffe, who just concentrated on photographing what was around him. And what was around him was fishing folks in Whitby. They registered distinctly in my mind and may have been little precursors to me becoming a photographer. I'm unhappy with being designated documentary photography, which I am by many people. I'm trying to present pictures that go deeper than simply documenting. I'm trying to say something about the values, about the resonance that I feel in the people that I photograph and the environments that they're living in. And I think that's not documenting. Documenting is making a record of something. This is more than a record. People ask me why I don't do colour. I think the main reason I prefer black and white is your mind just sees this greyness, this black and whiteness, and that allows individuals to put their own colour in. And using a black and white negative, you're able to manipulate it a lot more in the printing process than you can with colour. It's never ever a straight print. The reason I'm using 5:4 is because it's got quality. And 5:4 has a sense of a vision which is considered. And I'm obsessed with spatial relationships, how a figure in a portrait will relate to what's next to it, what's behind it. And I'm very careful to compose that as tightly as I can. And that, I think, gives a kind of a authority to the picture. With the Greetham Creek series of works, I really got into 5:4 there. And the way I did it was to photograph each of the houseboats which were at Greetham Creek from different angles, just to get used to using this process. While I was making those photographs, I was also drawing at the same time. I would sit down for maybe 3 or 4 hours and do a very detailed, very fine drawing of the landscape of the creek. They're not great drawings by any means, but what they are is me learning about that environment. Because when you draw, lots of things happen coincidentally. It might start to rain, the wind might blow stronger, the sun might come out, the light changes. And all these things, they're all important to making photographs. And so this notion of looking at the environment through drawing and looking at the environment with a camera became kind of intermingled. A lot of the photographs that I've made in the blast furnace, in the shipyard, there's also related drawings, studying and understanding more deeply what's around me. Edvard Munch, who's perhaps my favourite painter, maybe expresses so much about the relationships between people and the environment. And the photographs that I make are trying to directly connect with the environment around me, like Greetham Creek. I first went to Greetham Creek in 1963. I used to go sea fishing, and it was still dark, it was raining, it was cold, and I was aware vaguely of screaming marsh birds like redshanks and curlews and godwits, but also these buildings that were around. Strange, really strange structures, really Dickensian, a bit like David Copperfield out on the marsh. And it was misty and it was kind of weird, but it was beautiful. And I registered the beauty, and the houseboats were just so enigmatic. They nestled into the environment beautifully. And I was struck by this beauty, and so I wanted to record it. The blast furnace has a drama, I can only use that word beauty, and the people who work in it are just amazing. The shipyard was the same. The announced closure of the shipyard on the television news, and the director of the company found out the same time we found out listening to the morning news. And when we went in, they welcomed us with open arms. We went in first in the August, and we stayed until closure was the 27th of February 1987. And so this thing about capturing change through the photographs, I think is very important. So the blast furnace is gone, the shipyard is gone. You're able to capture something of the essence of places. And this is done to honour both my father and my grandfather. And I wanted to, with the furnace and with the shipyard, with that heavy industry, which is, we now know is gone from Teesside, I'm so glad that I was able to capture something of it and give it some kind of status and dignity. And time again, you're with the camera, and it gives you this opportunity to talk to people, to bump up against people. And I like to feel that all the pictures that I show of people, show them with a certain amount of pride in what they are, as they feel comfortable with being represented. The first photograph that really resonates with me is a picture of Ken Robinson stood by his cabin at Greetham Creek. He had a beautiful cobble called the Major, built in 1890 in Hartlepool, and he had it spick and span. I was down the creek one day and he was working on the boat. The tide began to come in and the boat rose up and he got into his little dinghy and he came towards the shore. He had his waders on and his boiler suit, and I said, "Oh, Ken, I'd like to do a picture of you. Is that all right?" He said, "Oh, yeah, it's all right." I said, "Can you just stand by your cabin?" And behind him there were some boards. I said, "What's behind those boards, Ken?" He says, "Oh, I'll show you if you like." He said, "It's a window." And he lifted this window up and there was this beautiful reflection of the creek with a boat in. And it was perfect. It was like some of those Renaissance paintings where the artist will do a portrait of somebody and then in the background there'll be a little window of the view out of their life. And I just made one exposure. I knew it was perfect. It was very exciting making that exposure. It's the most exciting photograph, in fact, I've ever taken. The school photographs are the photographs I'm most drawn to. I taught in a secondary modern school on and off for 28 years. And what absolutely amazed me about schools and young people was their vitality, their individuality, the way they came to school, the way they tied their ties, their attitude. It's just fabulous. When we came to live here, I started to play this game called Kites, which is played in the Esk Valley here, and you have teas. I did a series. One of the pictures of that was up Glaisdale Head, where they have teas in the chapel room. And I took some mounted prints in to show everybody. So I've got a photograph of the wives, the girlfriends, the daughters, and they're looking at one of the photographs and they're pointing out who's who. And it's just emblematic of the community that is in places. I thrashed around for a long time with deciding on a title for the exhibition. And then I thought, well, what am I actually trying to do here? I'm trying to stop time. I'm trying to show time. I'm fixing time. I'm trying to fix time in a space. And fixing time, of course, you use fix to fix the prints, to make the prints permanent. I've really enjoyed fitting it together because it's an opportunity to try and say something about our relationship with the Tees estuary and with its hinterland that I grew up in. It's an appropriate time. I mean, I'm getting on a bit, and it's great that it's over two spaces because you can concentrate in one space on one area and in another space in another area. I've tried to engineer it like I engineer my photographs to be as I can. I'm hoping people will see sequences so that you move through the exhibition at the museum as a journey around Teesside. And at NGCA, the work is more about the heavy industry. The glass furnace and the shipyard feature very strongly. Tying those two together, there's the young people in school, and as I left school, those were the kinds of industries you were going to. And then you come into the drawings. The drawings are much more private, much more personal, expressing things that I don't understand. With many of the drawings that are unsure, there's a kind of despair in some of them, a kind of sense of loss. The first drawing in the drawing section is a screaming man. And that is a very personal drawing, which I was going through some trauma when I made it. He's in a cage. And that cage came from a Joseph Kadelka photograph in Spain. And then around it, I fitted people dancing and screaming and warming their hands on fires. And it represents so much of what we see now almost daily. Gaza, Ukraine. I could barely bear to watch the television news. And so in these drawings, I think I'm trying to express some of what I feel about that. And of course, the shipyard closing caused a lot of different trauma for different people. People lost their jobs, people might have lost their houses. And so you go out of the trauma of that into this different kind of trauma of working for a living, 40, 48, 56 hours a week. It's been great to really create these exhibitions. It'll give people a chance not only to see my photographs, but also through seeing those photographs, reflecting on their lives, because they're looking at the work. And of course, what they take to the work, it's not the sum of my time. The picture's the sum of my time. They're looking at the picture is the sum of their time. And the way you sequence these pictures is about being able to give them opportunities to reflect on their lives, their past, their time.